Welcome to The PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. Welcome back to another episode of The PA is In. Today, we have a special guest, Amy Story. Amy is a mom of two, a physician assistant, and a self-proclaimed creator. She is the founder of the community Humans in Healthcare. And today, we're going to talk about community, empathy, burnout, boundaries, all of these things that affect how we feel in terms of fulfillment and personal and professional satisfaction. This is a conversation you are not going to miss. So without further ado, here she is, Amy Story. Amy, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So excited to be here.
If you could just take a moment to introduce yourself to our listeners, tell them who you are and what you do.
Yeah, of course. So I am first and foremost a mom to two little kids. I have a 6-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter who, are all the things, teaching me, testing me, and all the things. In my professional life, I am a physician assistant by training, have transitioned out of clinical care, and currently lead a clinical community, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. I live out here in Arizona, moved here about 3 years ago, cross country from Buffalo, New York. So rather enjoying the lack of snow. I wish to never see snow again in my life. Trying to enjoy life as it comes.
Awesome. What prompted the move? Was the move for a job or you were just ready for a big change?
Yeah, so it was kind of multifactorial. It was at the height of the pandemic. So, I think most people in that season were like, "Ooh, could I live somewhere else?" It was partly also for my husband's job. They're home based in Buffalo, but they were growing geographically and really wanted a physical person in the West. So it was like that perfect opportunity. And I think we had just grown out of that season of our lives. Like we had been feeling this tension of feeling like we had outgrown the place that we had lived the past 12 years and we're just ready for that, new season of adventure. My daughter was 9 months old at the time. We didn't know anyone when we moved. But I have really embraced it and loved it. And I feel just now, 3 years later, starting to put down roots. It takes so much time to transition, especially when you don't know anyone. But really feeling like we're embracing the West and the openness out here. It's been great.
That's so wonderful to hear. I think that that is true from a professional standpoint too. Like it takes a while when you start something new to really feel rooted and like you're no longer the brand new person and that you are where you belong, or maybe you realize you're not where you belong. Either way, it's good to identify that from a professional standpoint. So could you tell us a little bit about your clinical background? So what did you do when you were practicing? And then we'll go from there.
Yeah, of course. So I practiced clinically direct patient care for about 7 years. My background is predominantly in gastroenterology, and then I also spent some time in neurobehavioral health as well. And actually, there's quite a big crossover between GI and mental health. We oftentimes say, "Is it psych or is it GI?" I don't know. And it was a great experience. GI is really interesting because there's a lot of internal medicine in GI, right? You're seeing anemias of unknown etiology, or you're dealing with liver disease, which is it affects multi organs. And I worked in a variety of settings in GI, so both inpatient where we saw more acute conditions, and then outpatient where we saw anywhere from constipation and diarrhea to ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. And so it was a really interesting, learning opportunity. I got a little bit burned out at year 7, and have since transitioned out of direct clinical care. I still keep up my credentials, and so I try to look at my career, and we may get into this a little bit, but I try to look at my career in seasons. And so right now in this season of my life, just with my kids' age, the level of needs that they have, my husband travels a lot for work. I felt it best for my own balance to not practice clinically, but who's to say, that won't change down the road. But for right now, I'm again just embracing that transition and season of my life.
Yeah. It's such a beautiful reminder that nothing is permanent, right? These young children with these high needs, this season of moving or your spouse leaning in at work, all of those things have the potential to change. Like your kids will age, right? That we know is definitely going to change, but maybe your spouse will get to a season where they're not leaning in quite so much at work and you have more capacity to step back into that clinical medicine space, or maybe not. I think we don't talk enough in clinical medicine about the fact that clinical medicine is but one way to use our degree and our training. So we're going to jump around a little bit, but while we're talking about this, I would love it if you would share some of your thoughts on how we can use that schooling and those sort of traditional clinical skills, the things that we know, the H&P, the seeing the patient, the getting them admitted, the communication that we're using with patients on a regular basis. How can we take those traditional skills and apply them in non-traditional ways, and how you've done that in your career?
Yeah. So I love taglines, and I created that tagline because it really helped me understand the value of all of these skills that I have as a clinician and how they are used broadly. Because a lot of clinicians reach out to me and say, "Hey, I want to do something a little bit different, but what could I possibly do? I don't know. I just see patients all day." Oh man, there's so much that we can do and utilize our skills, even if that looks like it's beyond the clinic walls. And I think we really undersell ourselves as clinicians when we lean into the sole identity of a clinician as just seeing a patient, right? Just think about what you do in your day to day when you are, let's say you're in a specialty, so you're like maybe consulting on a patient, right? You are taking a concept. You're like, a patient comes into the office and says, "Yeah, I really just don't feel well. Like in GI, my belly hurts," right? That's a concept. And then what you have to do is you have to use your systems thinking to really drill down that concept to help it become more defined. And so that's totally something that you could use in another capacity when you're thinking about roles in business, right? Where a lot of like operation roles or even project management or strategy type roles, especially when there's a healthcare component, are really looking at systems thinking. They're taking concepts and putting some color to them, really drilling down those details to really further define what it is you're trying to do. And we do this all day long. And it's such an underrated skill. Not everyone can think in systems like that, to really take a concept and understand all of those moving parts and pieces to really define it. And so I really encourage, clinicians who are like stuck in what it is that they can do, just think about the finer details of what you do, in your H&P. Not just systems thinking though, right? We are communicating left, right, and center, up and down as well, up potentially to a supervising physician or a collaborating physician, or down to that, medical assistant or the checkout person, right? That takes a skill set to communicate efficiently and effectively and know your audience of to whom you're communicating, including the patient, including the family, right? That stakeholder communication is really a valuable skill. And you do this all day long in roles outside of healthcare. And again, it's one of those skills that we just naturally do and we improve over time. And, it's really highly valued and utilized. And I think the other thing that's underrated and what we can certainly use in non-traditional environments is critical thinking and prioritization, right? I mean, we absolutely have to do this as clinicians to stay on time. It's built into our bones how to be efficient. We learn this in school, right? Like how to kind of navigate that conversation with the patient or really guide that conversation so you can get the most, detail out of that. And that really is also how to do it efficiently. And so when you think about roles, outside of healthcare, a lot of teams look for that. How do you prioritize your day, right? How do you set yourself up for success? How do you find those three top valuable things that you're going to work on that are going to have the most high impact, right? How do you do that in a role outside of healthcare? And we do this in our day. We have, I'm sure, so many hacks on productivity and how to write our notes well. And then critical thinking, I think, is part of that, where we really have to drop those kind of unnecessary things to really hone down on what is that highest level of decision making I need to be doing right now, at what level of urgency for my patient. And when you get into like a business role, especially like a project management role, I mean, a lot of it is that, right? That prioritization. What are those top things that are not filler that I need to be working on? And again, we do this all day long as clinicians. So I think a lot of it is just like understanding how we articulate those things that we're already doing and knowing that they certainly apply elsewhere and they're highly, highly valued. We just need to see them as valuable.
Yeah. The other thing that brings to mind when you're talking about that is, just because it's easy for you doesn't mean that it's not valuable for someone else. Because what you're describing is a day in the life of a clinician. We're triaging, we're seeing patients, we're making critical decisions, we're doing all of these things, but it doesn't feel hard. It feels normal for us. So look at your day almost through the lens of an outsider, or if better yet, you have someone in your life who lives in a space outside of healthcare professionally. Ask them, like, describe to them, this is what I did today. I did this, and then this happened, and this happened. And then say, tell me in business words what I'm saying, right? So tell me all of these things, because I had clinic today. So I saw, a handful of patients. I did a lot of those things that you were talking about, but I didn't think of concept to systems processing, right? I just saw the patient, made an assessment, created a plan, executed the plan, said we'll follow up in XYZ timeline. So that didn't feel like project management skills. It felt like me practicing medicine. So just because it doesn't seem hard to you doesn't mean it doesn't have value in some other arena.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right. I think that, picking other people's brains who are in a different world than you, and asking them like, what would this look like in your day, and describe what you're doing, is super helpful. Because when you're thinking about, a non-traditional role that's not, directly clinical, the I think the where clinicians get stuck is they just don't know how to speak in that language that that other person needs to understand. That person who may not have a healthcare background is so critical. You really need to spell out, your skills, but you have to be the one to do that, because they're not going to naturally understand what an H&P is and all that is involved in that, right? And so, yeah, it takes a lot of work to be able to do that, but it's doable.
If you're often freezing at work, you need Scrubmates, the insulating underscrub to treat your shivering. Like a bear hugger for providers, these underscrubs will keep you warm even in the coldest environments. Scrubmates offers a sleeveless option approved for the OR, as well as long-sleeved options for those who work elsewhere. They even have a patent-pending pocket for your valuables. No more tying your rings to your scrub drawstrings. Life is too short to have goosebumps all day. A PA-founded company, Scrubmates is on a quest to make your day more comfortable with super soft, functional, and affordable scrubs and underscrubs. Head to wearscrubmates.com to fight the hospital freeze. And it seems like you need a translator, or to figure out what the translation is of what you're doing in terms of the realm you're trying to break into. So if it's a business role, if it's an IT, if it's, something with healthcare technology, what have you been doing? And then figuring out how that translates into their language in terms of what they're talking about for job descriptions or for roles or responsibilities or whatever it is that you're looking at. How can I make what I have been doing applicable and sound like what they're looking for?
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. So I would like to talk about something that I think No one is talking about enough in this world where we tend to consume, 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 and we think more is more. Let's talk about finding your enough and what that looks like. If you could give us some examples for you, but also what that looks like in the context of this world where we are constantly bombarded with other people's lives and values and expectations and what they are doing. How can we sort of center ourselves on ourselves and figure out what enough is for us?
Yeah, this has been such a journey for me. And, not to say I have it all figured out, but I think the fact that I'm willing to be on the journey is good enough. Yeah, I think I personally have always had this challenge of, feeling either oscillating between too much or not enough, right? So finding enough, even just in my own confidence in who I am, has been a long-standing work in progress. And, when I was, as a PA, and I think healthcare professionals in general, we are conditioned to want to always do more. I mean, think about it. We really have to work at our top 100% most every day because and we're led to believe that we need to do that, right? Because at the end of the day, lives are on the line, right? So in a different job where maybe there's that balance of giving less, you don't really get that opportunity in healthcare. So I think that first and foremost, we are really conditioned as healthcare professionals to not really ever understand what is enough. Like, we're always striving and doing more, and there's always more to do. And then I think from the professional standpoint, right, it's always what more are your credentials, or what is after your title, or what other certification can you get, or go into the doctorate, which is not a bad thing at all, right? But I think people don't often question, well, is it actually what I want? And is it actually, internally serving my own wants and desires and needs? Or am I just looking at this external validation and just seeking more because it's what the world says I should do? It's what people think I should do. It's what I think I should be doing based on what other people are doing. And so when I made my transition journey outside of healthcare, I think this also exists outside of healthcare too, just in a different fashion. And so a lot of my transition journey has been more in the tech world. And in tech, I think the similarities between healthcare to tech is this hustle mindset, this hustle. Like, I'm grinding, I'm always on, I'm doing more, I'm, always be closing, meaning I'm always talking to someone else to sell my business an opportunity. I'm sleeping under my desk, I'm working overnight, I'm doing all of these things more and more and more and more and more. And I was naive. I didn't understand. I didn't understand that. And I think, ultimately what ended up happening in my experience was I really traded burnout for burnout. I was really like not mindful of that mentality. And I thought, oh, okay, so this is normal. So I was hustling. And when I had just a really extreme situation where I was just like full out not functioning, burned to the ground, burned out. I was, neglecting myself, my kids. I was not, meeting what they needed. And I got to this point of, asking myself, well, what is hustle, and why can't it be, why don't we hustle for our work and not our worth? Because I think that's the key distinction, right? When we think of striving for more and more and more, I think what we actually are striving for is just proving our worth. And that becomes an endless chase. It becomes an endless, unsustainable chase. But when we think about, well, if I just maybe hustle for my own work and like what that means for me, what's sustainable for me, what are the things that I enjoy and like to do outside of salary, outside of that title, outside of something that's external, what is that internal driver and that internal satisfaction? And what is that? And how can I actually strive for that? And it really becomes more about this like internal locus of satisfaction versus this external validation. And I think really where I've come to arrive is, proving our worth is just this endless chase, but thinking about providing our value, which we can do when we know what our values are and what aligns with our values, that becomes a much more sustainable race. And so for me, I don't care about a title. I could really care less. So I ended up jumping off a career ladder completely, like completely. Like I jumped off. I'm not a W-2 employee. I started my own little consulting, doing project work. And even with that, it's really not all that much. I'm not hustling. I'm not like, building my pipeline. It's just, I'm doing one project at a time. Because I felt like in order to really understand what my enough is, I needed to completely jump off any ladder of more and really just be at the ground level where I'm really choosing to build that living and build that life instead of chasing a living. Building a life, meaning I want enough means for me, like being able to pick my kid up at 3, right? Enough means being able to turn my screen off and not feel guilty. Enough means being able to care for my own soul and the nourishment in a way that I need, which is taking yoga and going out for a walk and not working through lunch, like sitting down and enjoying food and nourishment and community. And instead of chasing a living, which is how much money can I make? How many projects can I do? What is that title? What is that thing? And I realize it's hard, right? Because in this culture that we live in the American culture, like that's what we're conditioned to do. It's always more. How can you earn more? How can you get to more, right? But that's just not sustainable. So I'll pause. I know that was a little bit of rambling.
No, for sure. I mean, there's so many nuggets of goodness in there. I'm over here taking notes on things that I'm like, yes, like this is how I was feeling. I was feeling like my worth as a person and also as a provider was directly related to the specialty, the setting, the number of patients I was seeing, the accolades that I was earning, the complexity of cases that I was scrubbing. And I was getting, and honestly, when you're doing the things that you think are valuable, you tend to feel great, right? So like when you're doing those things, the input is actually very positive. You're like, I am at the top of my surgical game. I'm scrubbing these complicated partial nephrectomies and I'm clamping these technically challenging arteries. Like the input is actually, good. What isn't good is that it's not a sustainable way to figure out what you are worth as a person, which is a weird phrase to say because everyone is worthy. Everyone is enough. Your enoughness, your worthiness, your value almost never comes from work, right? So it is not, what you do. It is who you are. It is how you show up in the world. It is what you value. It's how you treat other people. There's all of these things that are much more nebulous and much harder to quantify in terms of how am I doing, right? So at work, how am I doing is like, how's my performance eval? How many dollars did I make this year? How many patients did it, how many cases did I, it's objective. It's something that you can measure and say, look at me, I'm doing such a great job, right? I'm doing such a great job. And when I was in the deepest season of burnout, when I was struggling mentally and physically and emotionally and from a spiritual standpoint, I was the most productive. I was the most effective. I was the most objectively worthwhile employee in terms of what I was generating from revenue, what I was putting out in billing, what I was showing up and doing in meetings. All of those outputs were there, and I was completely empty. So the output does not necessarily reflect the internal, sustainability of your career, of your life, of how you're feeling about yourself. Those things are so incredibly important. And I did not realize that early in my career. I thought the external measures of success were what mattered, right? 6-figure salary, sexy specialty, respect of my surgeons, feeling like I could hold my own in the OR with residents or fellows or other, med students or whatever. Turns out none of that matters.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And I think like it's hard, right? Because when you're around other people who are also measuring themselves by those things, like it just kind of becomes like, oh, this is normal and this is what this is it, right? That I'm living the good life. But really, are you? Are like, can you actually look at your life and feel like, are you fulfilled? Or are you just, burning the fumes, or running on empty? I think it's also interesting and not I'm not against feminism by any means, but I think that there is this level of drive, for women as well, where it's like, okay, well, we've got to shatter the glass ceiling and we need to be doing, all of these things and being in the boardroom and, having equal salaries. And of course, obviously we want equality, we want, representation, but it almost becomes again like that conditioned chase to think, well, I'm not enough if I don't want those things. But the reality is like we all have a choice, and if you want to do those things, like that's absolutely okay, do them. But do it because you want to do it, not because you feel like you have to do it. And I think that being on social media and just like all of the ways in which people share the highlight reels doesn't help, because it really filters out, people's struggle. Like no one is going through life and not struggling. Like everyone has a struggle, everyone has a story, but all we see sometimes is the highlight reel of someone smashing success. And so we compare it to our own, real reel is what I call it, which the real reel is, ups and downs and highs and lows and, not winning all the time. And I really encourage people just to remember, like, it's okay to struggle. Like, that can certainly be part of your story. And that's all right. Like, that is actually where oftentimes you do find your enough, in those lowest moments of your own resolve, rising up from your place of worth instead of reaching for it. Right. And so I really encourage, especially women listening to this, like, you can do those things. You absolutely can. You may not have it all at the same time, but just make sure that it's something you want. And if it's not what you want, you're still enough. You are enough. You are enough. So yeah, I've struggled with that too, for sure.
Such an important reminder. And when you were talking earlier about hustling, I actually wrote down, what are you hustling towards? And is it something that you want? Like, if you're hustling towards something, that you're hustling towards financial freedom, you're hustling towards time freedom, it's something that you want because it's going to give you back something that you value. I think that hustle seems reasonable. And the other thing to ask yourself, if you're in a season of pushing, if you're in a season of hustle, is, are you headed in the direction of something that you want? And at what cost? So sure, you can get that promotion, that leadership position. You can become the chief of this or the, king of that or whatever. At what cost? Because if it is costing you things that you really, really value in your life, the cost is too high. Like, let me say that to you. If you have something that you value, I value my relationships, I value my family, I value my sleep and time and peace and all of these things. If anything, professional, personal, or otherwise, is costing you the things that you value most in the world, the cost is too high.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's such a good way to look at it. And it's also defining, yeah, like what is that cost, for you? Because I think people also need to remember that everyone has different levels of energy. And so, yeah, with hustle, like if, think about like, it's absolutely okay to hustle for something that is, something that you're very purpose driven toward, but just remember, like maybe that means it's just that one thing. And maybe it doesn't have to be these 10 different things, because energy management is real when it comes to burnout and, making sure that it's like for that really defined thing. So you're not spread so thin along multiple things. Because I think the cost of that is actually really great, right? Because you really, input like just all that you have toward that something instead of everything, right? So like, what is that one thing, and maybe not everything? I think it's like in tech too, there's this adage of like, well, I want to transition to tech because I want to help people at scale, right? This word at scale, meaning I want to help more people. But the way that I've come to look at it in my own life is, well, I can't help everyone, but I can help someone, and that someone it that is also impactful. And so I think even like thinking about your enough, even from like a helping perspective, you don't have to help everyone, but you can help someone, right? And just narrowing it down to that one person who can really hear or get some value from what you share or what you're building or what you're hustling for.
Yeah, yeah, which is such a beautiful reminder of the fact that, this term influencer is having its heyday, right? I'm an influencer. And I'm like, I mean, I am influencing my children. Like I am influencing my family. So if you have one follower, you're an influencer, but like the people that you can influence the most probably are not strangers from the internet, right? They're probably actual people in your actual life that you have the most influence of. So focus on that influence as opposed to gaining, numbers and followers and sort of these flashy, again, objective metrics of, the impact that you're having, which leads me to one of the other topics we want to discuss. So let's talk about empathy, how we can be more empathetic to others, to our patients, to people in our life that we love, and how we can heal and the role that community has played, maybe in your story with healing or just, in general, what we can take from that as people who work in healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think empathy, unfortunately can sometimes be a buzzword. um, but when I think about empathy, right, I think about the precursor to me for empathy is vulnerability. And really, vulnerability comes from willingness to show up and be seen and connect with others, right? And I think empathy gets a bad rap in the sense that I don't think it's about walking in someone else's shoes, because I think that's really impossible, but rather connecting with someone in their own story, connecting with those shared experiences or feelings, right? I may not be able to resonate with, someone who comes in with a cancer diagnosis, but I can for sure resonate with, the anxiety and the fear of the unknown and just the pain and suffering that they're feeling. And I think unfortunately in healthcare, we lose that. I think both as professionals and as patients. And what that does, and this is not to blame, right? It's just the way that the system is set up, right? You have a lot of people to see, you have a lot to do in your day. And, empathy and connection takes a pause. But I think what ends up happening is we really lose that shared humanity between a healer and a person, that helper and the person. And then what that does is it really disconnects us from each other, and it creates this like dehumanization where now I only see that patient as a metric and a number, instead of the story that they have, the person that they are, and vice versa, right? When a patient comes in and doesn't like the care that you don't give them an antibiotic, right? Well, you're evil, or how dare you, or, and it creates this really unfortunate divide and disconnection. And so I really hope that as healthcare evolves, where we can really remember that at the end of the day, it's about meaningful connection and, really that shared humanity between equals, because a patient is a human and a healthcare professional is a human, and humans we're equals. So it's that kind of shared humanity between equals. And when I think about community, I think there's a few things, specifically for me in my own story. So I have a personal lived experience of anorexia nervosa. I struggled for about 10 years, pretty significantly throughout my teen years and early college years. And, you know, an eating disorder is very isolating. It's very shame based, and shame is often, thrives in secrets and, loneliness and just isolation. And so the only way that I was really able to heal from that is vulnerability and connection, but really bringing that into the light, into community of others who were having that, similar shared experience. And one thing I actually do now is I peer mentor others who are in their own recovery for this reason. It's a very much a community-esque approach where, I'm really walking with them in that shared experience and finding those moments of connection and community. I think this can be equally true, in healthcare when we're seeing patients, right? I think there's, we can't always, again, like know the full context of their story, but we can find those, moments of connection. And I think also the other piece of this is healthcare professionals to healthcare professionals. So when I, think about, there's a lot of factors that led to my burnout. But one thing for sure was this feeling like I had to carry all of these burdens and stories by myself and bury them alone, right? I mean, and as a healthcare professional, we deal with tragedies and traumas, right, in our day to day. It's just the nature of the course of what we do. We give patients life-changing diagnoses. We, lose them. We walk through the NICU and, see a tragedy, yet we have a healthy child at home. It's like these tragedies that we carry and bury. Or, a patient has a bad outcome and you wonder, like, what could I have done differently? Or what if, right? And in my own experience, I always wanted to connect with my healthcare team, right? Like, I want to just debrief. I want to talk about this. I want to offload a little bit of like how I'm experiencing this, because it's completely normal to have feelings, even though the culture of medicine says that we shouldn't. We need to just move on, right? We just need to move on. And so when I also think about community, it's that connection between our own professions. Like, how can we create a space of connection between our professions to really offload this a little bit so it disperses the burden of having to carry it so much alone? It's not grief therapy. It's not, really dealing like trauma therapy, but it's really just creating a space for connection along that shared experience to say, I'm not alone. You're not alone. This is how I'm feeling and it's okay. And maybe we can just talk about it. I made the effort to make those connections, many times in my experience. And it was always like, no, I don't have time. And I understand, right? Because I think there's a protective mechanism that we put up as that barrier. Like, if I go there, how am I going to feel? Am I going to break down? Am I going to be emotional? How are people going to perceive me and judge me? So I understood that. But I think that leads to burnout, is that lacking of connection even between healthcare professionals and within their own team. And so I think there's just something really beautiful and valid about just creating spaces, not only for patients, not only for your own experiences, but also in care teams as well, to really have those points of empathy and shared connection.
Have you ever wondered if your malpractice policy is providing you with enough coverage? Turns out that employers' policies protect their interest and not necessarily yours. CMNF Group offers personal liability protection that adapts to your growing, changing responsibilities, including state compacts and allowing for protection for practicing medicine across state lines. From telemedicine to license and HIPAA defense, if it's something that you need protection for, CMNF has you covered. PA students can even enjoy a completely free student policy from your first day as a student until you become a licensed PAC. In a climate where we are hyper aware of charting, wording, covering ourselves, and constantly worried about practicing defensive medicine, you can't leave your liability coverage up to chance. Enjoy the peace of mind, exceptional customer service, and find the best comprehensive coverage that fits your practice at www.cmfgroup.com/the PA is in, or click the link in the show notes. Yeah, I mean, we have M&M, right? We talk about things in terms of, case review or tumor board, or things where we're doing multidisciplinary meetings, but very few places are doing at least like multidisciplinary. Hey, we all cared for this patient, or we all had a similar experience, and, let's talk about it in a way that's going to be vulnerable and not punitive, right? And not, where everyone is going to say, hey, these things are hard. And the interesting thing is when you're talking about that shared humanity, those human connections, one of the hallmark symptoms of burnout is no longer feeling that personal connection to your patients, which has always been very interesting to me, because you can't break down crying every time you see a patient, right? So we have to have some balance between, incredible emotional vulnerability where we're just raw because every patient, we're feeling what they feel, we're, walking through their story in intimate detail, and I don't care about anyone. This is an established visit. This is a 99204. This is, a medical record number. It's not a person. It's not a story. It's not an experience. Like between those two, like I'm totally apathetic and can't connect with you at all. And I can connect with you so much I can't function. In between there is what I have sort of started thinking of as like each clinician's sort of sustainability set point, right? So where you're having enough connection where you feel the benefits also of this connection, of a deeper connection with your patients, but not so much that you can't keep going. And I think that set point is different for each person, depending on how much of a, empath you are, how, logical, like I don't know all of the factors that go into this thing, but I know that mine is different than yours, Amy. Like I just know you and I could walk through the same thing and it would resonate with me in a different way than it would resonate with you. Things would affect me in a different way than it would affect you. So to everyone listening, like try to key into how empathetic am I being? How am I doing in terms of connecting with my patients? And does that feel like not enough? Just right? Too much? How am I doing in terms of how sustainable this is for me in my professional life and in my career?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also add, how are you connecting with your own self? Because I think that also with my burnout, I describe it more as like this slow freeze because I literally felt frozen. Like I wasn't even in my body. I didn't even feel anything. Like my sensory system was just kind of shut down. And I think that is also an important piece of connection is like are you even connected with your own soul? And yeah, it's okay if the answer is no, but that probably signals something needs to be different, and to find what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. So, to the listener who is hungry for a space for connecting with other humans, Amy, can you tell us about humans in healthcare and what it is and who it's for and how people can check it out if they're interested in finding out more?
Yeah, so it is very exciting. It's a community for clinicians, and any clinical credential is welcome to join. I've really loved getting to hear and learn from the diverse clinician in the room. How often in our day, right, do we interact with an OT or a PT in close detail, and just getting to listen and learn from other that diverse clinician has been really fun. So it's a community for clinicians. I have, at the heart of it, first and foremost, is community. So what that means is it's a place to really identify yourself with a shared, identity, which that is a clinician, but also to have a space to just be shown to show up and be seen, and this kind of sense of belonging to something. I think you can certainly belong to like a professional organization like the AAPA or other places, but I think a true community is like you really want a place to be able to show up as yourself as an individual and be recognized for those things, but belong to kind of like this larger collective. So first and foremost, it's a community. But I have three main personas that I'm trying to serve in the community. The first being clinicians and transitions. And so I see transitions in multiple different ways, but most commonly it's someone who's in a job transition. Maybe that's a job into a different clinical realm, or perhaps it's, that non-traditional role that we talked about earlier in the conversation. What I've found in my experience, navigating this own process myself, but also because so many people reach out to me, it's really helpful to know that you have a space just to learn from others who are maybe in that process with you, or maybe are just contemplating, or who have also done it, just to get to hear experiences. It's not a prescriptive place, meaning, it's a place where you can kind of come and explore and understand what can I do with my clinical skills? What is that kind of clinical portfolio that I can create for myself? And just to get to hear from others who have these really wonderful, like just a variety of careers and experiences. Both from the group perspective, but also one-on-one. So I make myself really available to people in the community to talk about what it is that you want to do. Like, what are the things that are really, driving you, and just to provide that like kind of light one-on-one coaching. I wouldn't call it coaching, like, in detail, because I don't necessarily provide that, but it's really just that, kind of space when you're in transition. Other transitions I also consider leadership. So you're rising as a clinical leader. That doesn't often come with a handbook, right? And I think there's real value in having a space with other leaders to just talk about those challenges. So there's quite a few seasoned leaders in the group who are like itching to really have that dialogue with other people because it's lonely. And then from the transition point, also, like, maybe you're in a life transition. Maybe you just recently had a child and you're like, how do I do this in the clinic? How do I navigate this, space? We actually have quite a few who have just recently had a child, and just like navigating that space with others. Then there's this persona of creators. So clinician creators, like you, Tracy, there's a lot of people who are in podcasting or creating their courses, or, some are even building their own companies now. And I think it's a different mindset, from being a clinician, right, to now becoming a creator. It's a mindset shift, and that's really challenging, right? Create a space. It's like this whiteboarding, brainstorming space. Whereas when you're in the clinic, like, it's A to Z, you know exactly what you're doing, and you check off, kind of your boxes, right? So I just wanted to create the space to have other people who are doing it, where you can collaborate together. You can really amplify each other's endeavors, maybe connect with collaborators. I know that, some people have been on each other's podcasts or writing for each other's newsletters. And so it just creates this really cool space to have that non-social media comparison trap space to share openly about, creating. And then the last persona, and I would say, there's a lot of intersectionality between each persona. So there's a little bit of that transition in the creator. There's a little bit of creator in this other persona, which is that peer support and empowerment. And I see this being, people who are really burned out, people who really want that, what I was, talking about earlier, that space of community and connection, who really value that space to kind of, offload and share and get vent and be validated. One thing we do, I'm going to start doing more regularly, is something called grief rounds. And so this isn't necessarily like your typical medical rounds where you're talking about a case and dissecting those details. It's a sharing circle, a healing circle for people who want to share, what we talked about, like how patients change us, and just need that space and community to really connect and offload that a little bit. And so it's been really fun. I, have been enjoying. It's new. It's like 3 months old. We're at 80 members so far. And, I really would love to just continue to invite people to join the space and really experience the magic of community. I don't think that people really understand what that is until they come. So I'd really encourage people just to come and check it out.
Absolutely. I am a member of Humans in Healthcare, and I love it. It is this space that if you are working in an office and you feel like you are in a silo, like it is just you and you don't see other colleagues from your group, or you see them but don't feel connected to them, or there's not a great sense of community, or the culture where you are is terrible or even just not great. This is a really great place to go and connect with various other people inside of this space. But also it has just been just wonderful. People in there are very honest, but also very encouraging. So you're going to get real takes, but not in a way that is going to make you feel like crap. That's my evaluation of the space.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I work really hard to cultivate the ability to be vulnerable and real, while at the same time always finding that piece of hope, because I think that's, what we absolutely need in this world today. And, again, like bringing the humanity back to what we're doing. So thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for being a member. It's nothing without its members. So
Yeah, I mean, if you could take anything from this episode, a reminder that we need more hope and more humanity as a part of taking care of patients inside of healthcare. Those are the pieces that are often missing that leave us wanting. So, if you can be the person that starts to connect with other people, if you can be the person that starts to give your patients hope and find some hope yourself and instill some hope in others, that will make a world of difference in how you feel, but also how the people around you feel. So important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome, Amy. Well, thank you for coming on the show today and sharing all of your deep wisdom with us. This has been a blast.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's been so fun.
What a refreshing reminder that in a world that tells us in order to be happy, we have to buy more, see more, do more, or work more, that there is this enough point for each one of us that is career sustainability, that is happiness in our personal lives, and feeling content with where we are professionally. It is so important to remember that connecting with others is important, but probably most important is, do you feel connected to yourself? Have you checked in with yourself? How is your nervous system doing? How are you doing health-wise? How's your mental health? How's your spiritual health? How is your soul? It's something that those of us working in medicine and in healthcare who are spending our lives devoted to taking care of others check in on not frequently enough. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to another episode of The PA is In. That's all for today. This PA is out. Congratulations, you've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA is In, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.